Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video. This time around for The Last Guardian on the PlayStation 4. A very long awaited game by many fans thanks to the pedigree of the previous two games developed by Team Ico and directed by Fumito Ueda, who created two excellent games on Ico and Shadows of the Colossus on the PlayStation 2. He built this cult following basically based on those two games, which were pure quality. And The Last Guardian took over 10 years in development. It took many delays, even transferred from being on the PS3 originally to now to the PS4. So finally we have a release here on The Last Guardian, one of the most awaited games of all time. Similarly to Final Fantasy 15, similarly to I guess Duke Nukem Forever. Those were games that fans were just waiting for many years. Some of them turned out okay, some of them not so much, like Duke Nukem Forever. But yeah, these are games that have built hype for many years. And in the case of the Last Guardian, I was personally very interested in it because Ico is one of my favorite games of all time. So I was eagerly anticipating the release of this game, and finally it's here, and I was finally able to beat this game. It only took me a few days, but I was very surprised by how good the game is and by how good it lived up to my own personal expectations. I know a lot of people, the hype went through the roof, and sometimes when these games are so big and so I guess so awaited by many fans, they will never be able to meet the hype or the expectations of fans. But for me personally, I try to keep some realistic expectations. But I do have to say the game is not perfect. It's not, even though I really enjoyed the game, there are so many things that really bother me about this game. But let's start with the story. I'm not going to spoil anything, obviously. One of the most powerful, I guess, weapons in Fumito Ueda repertoire is the minimal approach as far as storytelling. All three games from Team Ico so far have been very simple in terms of the story. They're stories that are told in the most basic and minimalistic way possible, but they do have a profound message once you get it really into the story of the game. With The Last Guardian is similar to Ico, the first game, because it's the bonding between two characters. In this case, you have a boy and the beast called Trico. And it's a story of how they bond together. The game starts with you, the boy, just basically waking up in this cave-looking area right next to these beasts, and you're all tattooed up. You don't know what happened to you. You're obviously confused, and you wake up right next to these chained beast, which is Trico. And then of course you slowly get closer to him, and then you free him up, and then you slowly start developing this bond between the two characters. But the story is very nice. I really enjoyed the ending. I'm not gonna say anything to spoil, but let me just say that this is classic Fumito Ueda or a Team Ico game. Very minimalistic story. Very basic storytelling, very few cutscenes, but when they kick in, they're very powerful, and they do a beautiful job of immersing the player and just telling what the story is all about. As far as gameplay, this is where well, let's talk about the graphics first before we delve into the gameplay. The graphics are a mixed bag for a lot of people, including myself. I thought for the most part the game looked great. It's a little bit weird because the main character, the boy, he almost looks like a cel shaded character, but everything else in the game looks very 3D models, and especially Trico, which he looks. He's very beautifully done. The 3D model, Trico, he's a beast. He's like a half dog, half bird, and the feathers, the animations on the face of Trico, the 3D models are excellent and beautifully presented to the player. The emotions are expressed really well, and it was just a little bit of a contrast having a cel shading looking character like the boy, and then Trico. And everything else looks pretty nice. The environment, The art direction of the game is fantastic, but I do have to say that there are some hints, definitely in terms of the graphics, that this was a original PlayStation 3 game. But to me that was fine. But some people complained that the game could have used a little bit more detail in terms of the structures and everything like that. But overall, the art direction in this game is fantastic. It's in my opinion, it's very similar to Ico. The world, has this. They present you basically this impossible architecture of structures that are hundreds of feet tall structures with impossible architecture, and it's just a very fascinating place to explore and to look at. So this game does a very beautiful job of doing that, and Ico was a similar type of game, presenting you these overwhelming structures and architecture that were just beautiful. And The Last Guardian does a really good job of doing that as well. Now, as far as the soundtrack in this game is very minimal, like in previous games. But when it does kick in, there's a very few piano tunes here and there, songs. The game, I would say, 90% of this game is just ambience sound. But the few times that a song kicks in, it kicks in at the right moment, and it adds that emotional note or that tension note that the game is trying to convey. So I think they did a beautiful job as far as the soundtrack or the music selection. Even though it's minimal, it does a very, very effective job of just adding that perfect note for when the time comes. So props to the to the sound of the game, even though it's not very complex or anything like that. They did a fantastic job. As far as the gameplay, this is where I guess I'm gonna talk the most. The gameplay, unfortunately, is not very good. Oh, and one last thing regarding the graphics, I guess. I didn't mind the graphics, but I forgot to mention the performance of this game, which is, I would say, subpar. Unfortunately, the game does suffer from a lot of frame rate drops. In some cases, the frame rate in this game is unfortunately really, really bad. And I know there's a lot of people out there that care about this stuff. For me personally, it did not break the immersion, but obviously I would have liked the game to have a better frame rate and just a better overall performance. There's a lot of slowdowns here and there, and it's a little bit disappointing considering the reason why this game got delayed and the reason why this game got moved from the PS3 to the PS4. Or one of the main reasons was that the PS3 was not powerful enough to handle the game itself. So it's disappointing that even though now they have all the weapons at their disposal for developing the game, they were not able to make this game run smoother. I did hear though that the PS4 Pro version runs much better, which is no surprise, but you do have to pay that hefty price tag or upped price tag in order to enjoy the full experience, which I don't have a PS4 Pro. I'm not thinking of picking one up anytime soon, unfortunately. So it's unfortunate that you have to get that version of the game to get the optimal I guess performance and version of the game. But with that, let's go back to the gameplay, which is unfortunately where the game suffers a lot in terms of the controls and the camera. Those are the two big negatives that I found in this game, and that a lot of people are also encountering, and a lot of people are complaining about these two things online. The controls are basic. They do have an old vibe in the sense that X is not jump, you jump with triangle, so it goes back to the PS2 era in those games. So it took a little bit to get used to. It would have been nice if they offered a customizable control scheme in the options, but you do have to go old school and jump with like triangle and do other weird actions with the controls. But the main complaints steer from the fact that Trico is not it's not perfect when it comes for you to give orders to him. As the game progresses, you gain the ability to as the bond between the two characters becomes bigger and closer, you're able to give orders to Trico in order to solve puzzles and all that. And he is not very responsive, unfortunately. And a lot of people were kind of defending this online, saying no, it's supposed to be like that because he's a creature. It's kind of like a dog, you know, when you tell a dog to sit, he's not going to do it sometimes, unless he's very, very well trained. So a lot of people are saying it's part of the game, the fact that Trico sometimes doesn't obey your commands, or it takes a while for him to acknowledge your commands. People are saying it's part of the game. For me personally, I think it adds to the charm, but there's a limit on how tolerable I am with this kind of situations. I mean, people were saying, no, Trico, he's kind of like your pet in the game. He's kind of like a mascot. He does have a learning curve. Sometimes it's good that he doesn't respond right away. Well, he might be a creature or a pet or a mascot or whatever, but I'm a human being, and you know, I have a limit too, and I get nervous breakdowns here and there, and you know, my high pressure went through the roof in certain sections of the game. So I find it a little bit. I did find those instances of to be very, very annoying, to the point where there were two, especially towards the end of the game. For some reason, Trico wasn't cooperating. I just had to pause the game because I was about to break my controller in half. And trust me, I tried different things. It's a combination of the game having old school mechanics, and I know Leo, who already did a review of this game, a video, he meant what is people are complaining about this game being last gen, and I do have to agree with some people. This game basically imports just the old school ragdoll physics that are found in both Ico and Shadows of the Colossus, which were two main complaints from people, including myself. You know, back in the day, you know, the ragdoll physics where, you know, your character just flaps all around. And unfortunately, this is back in The Last Guardian, which is a little bit disappointing because it feels like they just took the physics engine that they developed for those previous two games and they just used the same thing without really tweaking it much. I found, you know, the boy in certain instances where he would jump and, you know, because of the physics of the game, he would just not land where he's supposed to land. Or if you're running and jumping, if there's like a small hump, as you press the jump button, he may like fly off to a different path that you originally intended. So very small things that are that keep adding, and they're very small annoyances that they keep adding, and unfortunately hurt the gameplay. And it's disappointing because, again, this is a game that has been in development for over 10 years, and it would have been nice to have a more streamlined, better defined physics in this game. And also, you know, going back to the basics, just climbing on top of Trico sometimes can be challenging because the camera moves around. Trico, you know, you don't have control over his reactions, so sometimes he may be shaking or he may be scratching himself or something like that, which is cool, cute, or whatever you want to call it. But as you're trying to climb him, the camera may move and you may go a different direction that you're intending to, and sometimes you're in the middle of battle against these soldiers that follow you around, and it's just very tedious sometimes when you're trying to achieve something and the game is not cooperating with you. So a lot of annoyances for me personally that I found during my gameplay, which it's really, really unfortunate because, again, I was enjoying the rest of the game a lot, and giving orders to Trico and everything, it's pretty straightforward, but sometimes he goes the wrong way or he doesn't do what he's meant to do, and that's really, really annoying. And one of the funny thing is that, you know, sometimes I got killed Trico, because of the physics of the game. Sometimes he would like step as I was jumping, and he would push me over the ledge and pushing me over to, like, you know, my dying basically, which is very concerning. If you guys are going for the platinum trophy, I think there's a trophy for not dying you know, while beating the game, which again, I've died a few times, not on purpose, but it was my fault. You know, I misjudged a jump or things like that. But there were a lot of deaths that came from not being my fault. It's just Trico bumping into me, or just weird physics that were against me that you know, had me fall into the pits or whatever. So that can get really annoying. So with the negatives of the gameplay out of the out of here. Now that I talked about that, let's focus on the positive things. For me personally, I enjoyed Ico a lot. It's one of my favorite games of all time. So I was very pleasantly surprised to see The Last Guardian kind of follow that formula, where it's really a puzzle game. You go from quote-unquote room to room or area to area, and you have to solve a puzzle. That's basically what the gameplay boils down to. And it's really interesting on how everything unfolds. You have to be very observative in this game, which is something that I absolutely loved about Ico. Just going into a new area, a new room, stopping for a second, looking at your surroundings. Okay, there's a rope up there, there's some platforms on my left side, there's a switch on the second floor in that area. How can I solve these puzzles? And the puzzles are not hard at all. In fact, I did not have to look at any of the solutions of the puzzles. They were very straightforward, with the exception of maybe two puzzles. One of them I solved by accident, so I don't know if that counts or not. But all the other puzzles in the game, I was able to solve them just by thinking a little bit, looking around my surroundings and being patient, trying to think of what to do with Trico or what to do with the boy character that you control. It was really fun and very rewarding, because the puzzles are not very hard, and once you solve them, there's a certain level of accomplishment, even though they're kind of easy. In the same way that I felt while I was playing Portal for the PC, for example, where I did not find the puzzles to be very hard, but they're very I guess you have some sort of a reward feeling after you solve them, because you know it makes you're making progress, and you feel like the game is rewarding you for solving the puzzles, even though they're somewhat basic or simple. But I absolutely love in Ico just going to rooms, exploring, looking at the surroundings, looking at the environment. How can I use the environment? And the same thing applies to The Last Guardian. So if you enjoyed Ico and the puzzle solving in that game, I think you're going to enjoy The Last Guardian. And then the relationship between Trico and the boy obviously is something that I really appreciate this game from a design point of view. I always thought that one of the things why this game got delayed was the move from the PlayStation 3 to the PS4. But I truly and honestly think that another reason why this game got pushed is because just how hard the game was to develop, or to design rather. Because in Ico, for example, you had Yorda and the boy, which are two human characters. They're about the same size. They can they move at the same rate and things like that. But here you have a beast that is much bigger than you, and then you have the little boy. So that, in my opinion, I'm really sure that threw a monkey wrench to Fumito Ueda's ideas and puzzles, because now you have to take into consideration this huge character and this very small character, and to make the entire game work for the 10 hours or so that I played this, I thought it was, from a design standpoint, a very smart way to create this game, and just a very impressive on how they solved and how they created the puzzles, having that constraint of a big character and a very small character, and how everything blends together. The architecture, the structures, the buildings, the different areas you explore, and the puzzles you solve. I think in that regard, the game design and the level design and the puzzle design is just very, very, very impressive. And then, of course, you have the story, which I already talked about, and all I'm gonna say about the story is I was very, very impressed. I shouldn't say impressed, but I was very pleased with how everything unfolded in the game, and it's tough for me. I do have major gripes with this game in terms of the gameplay, which I already talked about, which is why I can't really put this above Ico. But definitely, I found this game to be much better than Shadow of the Colossus, which I know I'm in the minority here. I prefer Ico and this game over Shadow of the Colossus, which is a very popular game on the PlayStation 2. But I do think I can't really say if waiting was worth it. But I'm very happy that the game got released. I'm disappointed that they did not streamline the gameplay like I was hoping. For example, a quick solution to all those annoying, like for example, getting on the back of Trico, with the camera and everything. Sometimes it was very difficult. They could have added a shortcut function on the controls. For example, if you hold L1 and push X, so that your character automatically climbs on the back of the neck of Trico, for example. That would have been a current gen or next gen solution to that outdated format that the PlayStation 2 games had. Just add some shortcuts that will avoid the frustration, because I cannot tell you guys how many times I was fighting with the camera, wrestling with the camera, wrestling with Trico with his movements. I was pushing up, my character was going down. I was pushing down, my character was going up. In certain areas of the game, it was just very, very frustrating. And I kind of wish, by doing shortcuts in the controls, you were able to maybe climb automatically on the back of the neck of Trico. I did not find anything fun about struggling with the controls and anything like that, which is it leaves us a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, unfortunately. But overall, I do think that this game is fantastic, and it offers a fresh look on gameplay. Nowadays games out there are first-person shooters, third-person shooters. I enjoy them. I talked about them in my channel all the time. But it's very refreshing to have a game like this where there's very little fighting mechanics. In this game, there's no weapons basically. You do have a shield that can shoot enemies and stuff like that, but the bulk of the gameplay in this game is just puzzle solving and platforming. No killing enemies hardly at all. So I thought that was a very refreshing and something that is much needed nowadays, where just about every single game released is either a first-person shooter or a third-person shooter. I think this game, in terms of gameplay, offers something very fresh and very, very new. So that's it, guys. I really enjoyed The Last Guardian. Stay tuned. I'm sure I'm gonna do a top games of 2016 video in the coming months. So I'm sure this game will make it, because I did have a very, very good time. I love the puzzle solving. I love the story. I love the characters. I love the environment. But my main issues were the camera controls, the controls and the camera basically. So highly recommended that you guys get The Last Guardian for the PlayStation 4. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you all later.